Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Wednesday, May the 2nd, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And we have hit a new level of craziness with the weather. Earlier in the week, we were hitting highs in the 50s. Today, we have highs in the 90s. So for people who like crazy weather, come to New England. It is a very interesting time of year. I always say I love the spring, and I do love the spring. And some of the spring days have been gorgeous. The one part that I want to change somehow, and I'm not quite sure exactly what to focus on exactly, but I want to change the part where it goes directly from cold to hot without stopping in between, because I want more of the in-between stuff. But somehow, some way, I want to find a way to attract that. So I'll be working on that. That's one of my things to work on. How you doing, Wendy? What's happening in your life?
I'm doing really good. I have to say, one of the things I probably most enjoy that our audience or our listeners don't get a chance to participate in are our post calls.
Yeah, they're fun. They are.
I mean, there are times that we have to get off the phone immediately after the call, our show is over.
Right.
And other times we go on for, up to an hour and then some. And
I think our record was almost 2 hours one day. I don't remember which day it was.
I think so.
Yeah.
And yesterday we just had some really meaty conversation.
We did.
Which usually happens after we've had a really meaty show where we've talked about some really interesting content. And I know you were really enjoying it. And what's fascinating to me is when I'm talking about something, I'm talking with my experiences, my stories, and the intuitions that come to me. And then when you comment like, wow, that was really cool, I'll go, what was?
What was, right.
And you'll go, can you repeat that? I'm like, no. Not really. But I do remember, and I'm hoping this will jog your memory, because I thought it would be worth conversing about, because I remember you had an epiphany where we were talking about, specifically, you were saying something like, well, I'm really going to look for those places of resistance. I want to clear those places of resistance. And my comment was, it's not easy to just go look for resistance, but it's much easier to just put yourself on the path of deciding you want something, because resistances will just naturally appear. And then you specifically have something to work on.
Right, right. In fact, I think both you and Cindy pointed out to me, Cindy, I talked to her about it this morning, said it's actually not a good idea to go look for resistances, because then you're attracting more resistances. So it's probably not the best path to be on, which is a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
So then after we kind of talked about that, I said, so really the key, if you want to unlock the resistances that you think you have in your world, set your sights on what it is you desire. And then you kind of took the conversation into, well, I'll have to make time to do that.
Right. Yes, I remember.
Said, what is it you have to make time to do? And you said something like, well, to think about what it is that I want, I need to schedule time. But the problem is I never make the time for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said something like, well, that sounds like you're putting this on your to-do list.
Exactly.
And you went, well, kind of.
Yep.
So anyway, you kind of got some new insight around that. So what I said, did that jog your thoughts into where you're thinking about that now?
Yeah, it did. It did, and it does. What was happening in my own mind as we were talking is I was kind of half living in and half remembering the fact that a lot of my day, and this is not quite so much true in the last few months as it was before that, but before that, this was like the regular way my day went. My day was about problem solving. And more precisely, looking at the problem, hoping to find a solution, and spending a lot of time looking at the problem and focusing on problems. And then more problems would come my way. And then I'd work on those problems. And as I'm solving those, more problems would come my way because I'm focusing on problems. Which, once I finally had that pointed out to me by, I think 4 of you all pointed out to me, it's like, well, yeah, that's probably not the best strategy. Not unless I like to have lots of problems come my way. And I don't. I was sick of it. So that was in the back of my mind, and I was kind of mulling about that, and I was thinking, what I really need to do then is I need to replace this problem-solving thing that I tend to get hooked into, that I've actually been pulling away from fairly well, but replace that time, if you will, that I spend on that with focusing instead on as I focus on the big things in life that I want to attract, like you said, you get on the path and stuff starts to show up. And so when stuff shows up, then you deal with it. Well, maybe take some of that time that I would normally put on basically going around in circles about problems and focus instead on getting that resistance out of the way whenever it pops up. So basically reallocate the time. That way I don't have to make time. I don't have to schedule it. I don't have to do anything. I just kind of, change the way I go about going through my day.
So did you actually have time set aside on your calendar for problem solving?
Oh, yeah. I know it sounds terrible, but I did.
Is it still on your calendar?
No.
Or is it only when you have a specific thing that needs a resolution?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not like I went out of my way to say, okay, solve problems between 9 and 11. That's not the way it happened. No.
Just wanted to check.
It wasn't quite that severe. No, it would be like, a problem would come up with, I don't know. I don't really want to delve too deeply into it because I might trigger it again. But let's say, there's a problem associated with Louise's business. Something would come up. She hadn't been able to figure something out, so I would take it upon myself to solve that. Okay, so there's my first item on the list. And, by the way, one of my marketing clients has a problem, and he's turned a mountain into a molehill, so I got to solve that, so put that on my list. And then, it's just like one thing after another. My list would get longer and longer and longer to the point where day to day, I always had a long to-do list. And I still have a long to-do list, not as long as I used to, fortunately, because I've been cutting back on this, problem generation thing. But it's still there. So I've always had plenty of things to do. And that's why I fell into the rabbit hole, really, of thinking, well, I got to schedule time for it. Until you pointed out to me, well, you're scheduling it. Like, oh, yeah, right. That's not the way you do it. So it's like this ongoing learning process, right?
Yeah. And what I was... and the thing that I had kind of come to understand, and I was sharing in our conversation, was that what I am finding is that when it is hard for me to focus on the things I want, or it feels very manual, that I have to set time aside to do it, or remind myself to do it, or post a sticky note so I'll do it, that tells me there is resistance in the way. Because what I have found is that when everything is smooth sailing, I spontaneously focus on the things that I desire. Kind of like, if you think about it this way, if somebody is about to take a wonderful traveling vacation, something they desired to do for so very long, and, they're making the reservations, and, it's something that will give them so much satisfaction and fulfillment that I can't imagine that someone has to actually schedule time or have a Post-it note. Remember to get happy and excited about your trip that you're going to Rome, Italy, that you've always wanted to do. I just can't imagine that you have to schedule it to get excited or remember to focus on it, right?
Well, not now. There was a time when I literally was so much in the habit of not celebrating good things that were going on that I need to, like, a little jog of the memory to say, oh, yeah, this is fun. Jump up and down a little bit. I was in a pretty bad spot.
Well, I guess I wasn't really gearing that toward you, but now you got me really curious.
Yeah, I'm sure I do.
So when you were excited about going to see Abraham,
yeah, mm-hmm.
Did you have to be reminded?
No.
Okay. That's the kind of...
What I'm talking about happened, back when I was in my really depressed era. And in that era, I had to do all kinds of things to get myself off that track of being depressed all the time. So scheduling was actually one of the things I would do.
So right now, I wasn't really gearing what I was saying directly to you and what we just talked about. I was saying that the next part of the conversation was me talking about how I'm really recognizing, for me specifically, that if I have to work really hard to remember something that I want, then something's in the way.
Oh, yeah,
There's
I agree.
resistance on the trail.
Yeah.
Because yesterday I had a day of just absolutely complete spontaneity almost all day long, thinking about what I'll be doing in my new career and how fun it is and how free I feel and, oh my gosh, it's so different than what I'm doing now. And it's like, oh, I mean, I was hearing words in my head like, this is what I was born to do. This is so me. This feels so rich and exciting. And those thoughts were popping in very spontaneously.
Nice.
Like I'd be in the middle of a spreadsheet doing something for the day job, and all of a sudden these thoughts were popping in, and I'd hear, you're born to do this. And I'm like, oh, I love how this feels. And and each step along the way, as I've been doing, working toward my financial freedom through my new career, I've had moments and little pockets of this kind of spontaneity. And that's what kind of has kept me going. I'm like, ooh, this is really fun. This is really juicy. And then all of a sudden the spontaneity would kind of fall away, and I'd be thinking about it. And now there'd be some negative something that would pop up, and I'd go, oh, I just hit a speed bump, which we're now calling, resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd start looking at it and dissecting it, figuring it out until I was able to create new perceptions on the way I used to think that was keeping me in a negative place where something felt uncomfortable. And then when I found a new way to look at the old situation, it would like disappear. In other words, the negative thing would disappear. And then I'd start refocusing on what I desire, and all of a sudden the spontaneity would show back up again. And it was really fun. And I've kind of had this ebb and flow of that kind of experience over the last 4 months.
Okay.
And like right now I'm in the space of where, I just have wonderful thoughts that keeps popping up. Now, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden, okay, here's something that happens. All of a sudden I'll have a conscious moment, and I'll think to myself, and this is something that's very Wendy-like, what do I want to think about right now? Like if I just catch myself in thought and there's a blank space, I'll say, ooh, I want to keep dreaming about my new business, my new career. Yeah, that's what I want. And then it's real easy for the images and the thoughts and the feelings and the internal dialogue to just snap into place. So that might not be like the spontaneous thing, but it comes so easily. That's
close
like
enough.
Another layer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I notice when it comes real easy, or if it's really spontaneous, I know that at that moment, all systems are go, nothing's in the way, everything's good. Now, I'm not looking for resistance to pop up because I never know when it's going to be done. But, I expect that to be happening soon. I'm always expecting that for it to be done. The resistance is out of the way, and now it's smooth sailing, at least to level 1 of getting into my new career, because there will always be new challenges.
This is true.
So I eagerly accept them as part of the journey, because every time I clear something else off the path, it's like a feeling of going on a roller coaster. It's a huge rush. And once I've had that rush and it's over, I really look forward to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
One thing we talked about yesterday, I think it was off the call, was how I think it was in the context of scheduling and all that. You mentioned something to the effect that you deal with these resistances as they pop up during the day. That's the best way to put it that I can think of. And I'm wondering, when you're dealing with them, are you actually able to do that kind of focusing you're talking about, where you're kind of poking around and so forth while you're doing other things, or do you actually have to stop for a moment and just kind of focus there and sit with it?
Sometimes I can throw out the question, but I may not receive the answer right away.
Okay.
So if I'm in the middle of, a scheduled day where I have activities that have to be done, where I'm using my brain, like on spreadsheets and writing emails and that kind of thing, I'm usually not poking around for what is the resistance in those moments.
Which makes sense. I mean, that it takes some concentration to do that.
Mm-hmm. So when I say I find a pocket of resistance and then I work on it as it comes, it doesn't necessarily mean in that exact moment I stop everything to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely make a mental note like, ooh, here's something that, requires some effort. Okay, I used the wrong word. It requires some attention on my part to start picking this apart. And I might do it, while I'm eating dinner by myself. I might do it before I go to bed. Whenever I'm usually by myself, I'm kind of thinking things through. And then if I get to a point that I'm not quite sure where to go next, I'll phone a friend.
Okay.
I'll
Which we
ask
also talked
somebody
about.
that I know understands what I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll say, "Can I just bounce something off of you?" It's like I want it because my most productive method of clearing resistance is through a cathartic process. I need to hear myself talk, and it's almost like sometimes I need to hear myself talk to somebody.
Sure, it's easier.
Because, for me, what I say when I'm talking to you is different and more full and more expansive than if I'm just talking to myself.
Yeah, of course. Because when you're
You know,
talking with somebody else, you get feedback and you get the other perspective, and the other perspective influences the way you're thinking about what you're saying, so you expand on it some more and so forth. That's hard to do by
exactly.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes I can do parts of it by myself. Sometimes I do all of it by myself, but it takes longer. But when I get to a certain point that I have like a question, like, okay, here's what I've figured out so far, but I don't know what to do with this. That's usually when I say it's time to phone a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Okay.
and I like to say I don't always look for coaching, but if I can bounce ideas off of somebody,
Yeah, sure.
I usually will find my own answers.
Mm-hmm.
Just by hearing what I'm saying, and also through their input.
Right.
And so anyway, back to the thing. Yes, I work on resistance as it pops up, but not necessarily in the exact moment. But I don't stop until I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you
I
basically
work,
put it on the back burner until you have a few minutes to sit back and just kind of dwell on it for a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I find it a whole lot easier when I'm working on something specific. Like I'm wanting to create a new career
Mm-hmm.
that generates a lot of income for me. That gives me a much more solid target to work on the resistance, because if I start to lose my place and it starts to get muddy while I'm working on whatever this resistance thing is, I can always remind myself what I'm aiming for and go, okay, so how does this relate to that?
So
Whereas,
when you're working on something specific, that's as opposed to what general. What would be a general thing that doesn't work as well?
like if something just kind of arbitrarily happens, like it's like I don't want to name anything because I don't want bad things to happen in my world, just like you did earlier.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so let's say it's a windy day and it's garbage day, and because of the way the wind is, it blows the lids of garbage cans in the neighborhood up. And some people, like in my neighborhood, you're supposed to bag everything
Mm-hmm.
and then put it in the trash bin. But some people don't follow the rules, and the trash just blows all over the place.
Mm.
And because I live on an internal corner on my street, it's kind of like somehow the wind, because I live near an alley, it's like there's a vortex of wind that blows through my area, and I might end up with a ton of trash all over my front lawn.
Yeah, that's definitely something to
So,
avoid. I have to agree.
yeah, and so that's something that, when it happens, I will tell you, I've worked on this one, but when it happens, I don't get angry anymore. But it used to be so frustrating because I work really hard to keep a very beautiful yard.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's trash everywhere, I'm thinking to myself, hey, neighbors, you know this is your trash. You know what your stuff looks like. Come pick
Come
it
pick
up
it
off
up,
my
right?
yard. So I'm really honestly, I just took something that was real, but I have exaggerated it. So somebody, someone new in LOA might not even think of that as anything to, quote, work on or any resistance at all. It's just wind blows, stuff happens.
Mm.
Okay, there's truth to that. And if you think about it, when the wind is blowing, why does it land on my yard and nobody else's? Now, this is how you get into the nitty-gritty of really applying the law of attraction in a very functional way. Because if it's only landing on my lawn, believe it or not, there's something in me that's attracting it landing on my lawn. because it didn't, and this has happened many times. It doesn't seem to land anywhere else. It doesn't even blow past my house to my neighbor's house.
See, now that would have been my approach.
It all stays contained on Wendy's lawn. And so that might be the thing where if that doesn't bother me at all, it's not a thing. It's not resistance. If it doesn't bother me at all, it's not anything to work on or clear. But let's just say, and I'm using this really for illustration purposes, because when that happens now, it really doesn't bother me at all.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just say it happens, and it happens every single week on trash day.
Okay.
And I'm frustrated by it. It ticks me off. It makes me angry at the neighbors because they're not following the rules, because I make sure I put all of my stuff in a contained bag and tie it in a knot. And so there's no little stuff that can go flying about. So even if my trash bin opens, the weight of what's in in each hefty bag, if you will,
right,
is not going to allow it to go spilling out.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So that would be the kind of thing that, let's say it gets your attention because it causes some really negative response.
Okay.
That would be the kind of thing that maybe in the moment I'm picking up the trash is not, if it makes me angry, is not the best time to work on it.
Ah, okay, that's what you meant. Got it.
However, when you find yourself in a better place and you think about the trash and you go, oh, I'm really in a good space right now. Now's a good time to work on it. Because you never want to work on it when you're in an angry place, because you'll only receive angry thoughts. Say, so what is it in me that created that? What is it about trash landing on my lawn that's so disturbing? And you just ask questions. And, here's just stuff I'm going to throw out here just as an example. Okay, well, it's trash. What does trash mean? Well, trash is refuge. Trash is something I want to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
Trash could be toxic. Depending on what lands on my lawn, it could be messy, juicy, yucky stuff, or it could just be dry paper.
Yeah.
But I start looking at the quality of what landed on my lawn.
That's funny just to think about.
Well, I mean, I've been out, like I'll go outside to get my mail, which is in front of our house, and there'll be like ketchup packets near the curb. And when you pick that up, the ketchup packet is sticky and icky, or there'll be something where somebody went through a drive-through and got a drink that's in like a styrofoam cup, and then they either threw it out the window or somehow it came out of a trash can, and then people have run over it.
Yeah.
So now there's parts of the straw, the lid, the cup, and everything's sticky. And so the fact that, maybe as I'm thinking about it, there's this common denominator. The thing that really bugs me is that it's sticky and it gets all over my hands and I feel like I'm touching germs. And so even though this is not really my scenario, I can't really tell you where this is going to go. But these are the kinds of things that I would think about. Okay. Like, what thoughts are you thinking? Now, if I'm talking to a client, they want to talk about really big, important things. But you know what? I really want them to talk about the sticky ketchup packet and how it really ticked them off, because now everything they touched, and they went to get their mail, they got their mail, and now they're getting their mail sticky with the ketchup stuff. And now they're going to get sticky on the doorknob as they walk in the house. And it just really, it's like one thing after another really upsets them. And so if I were listening to what I'm saying now, I'd say, I wonder what's not sticking. Or I wonder what you're sticking to that you don't want to.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, the fact that just in my little diatribe, I kept using the word sticky.
Yeah, sure.
I'd say to my client, so it sounds like there's something with stickiness. Either you are being sticky or you're not being sticky. Let's talk about that. Is there anything in your life that you really wish you could stick to better than you are, or that things are not sticking?
We're actually doing a kind of free association here then.
Sometimes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you're just throwing around words until something pops.
Right.
And of all the things I just said about people's trash cans and it blowing on my yard and not everyone else, the only thing that all of a sudden started to gel in my thought process as I was doing this was the word sticky. That just popped up like, oh, interesting. So it causes me to wonder, how is the universe trying to get my attention through having trash land on my lawn or sticky things landing in my curb? But there's something about that is a message for me.
Okay.
And so let's see, can I even think of what it could end up being?
You're doing some pretty good grading here.
So let's say I'm talking about these sticky ketchup packages and everything about it is sticky.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing I tell you is, every time I put a Post-it note on the wall, it falls off.
Oh.
The thing that's supposed to be sticky is not sticky. And these ketchup packets are sticky. And I go, well, there's definitely something sticky in my life. What is sticky or not sticky? What does this mean to me?
Yeah, there's a metaphor going on.
Yeah, and so I look for metaphors because spirit, the universe, God, our inner being, they all speak in symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Symbols are the language of the spiritual world. So I don't look at things literally. I look at, what do they represent? What's the metaphor behind them?
Okay. That makes sense. I also have to tell you, too, there's also a lighter side to the story, by the way, because as you were telling that story, I realized it actually happened to me.
You don't think sticky packets are light?
Well, yeah, that is one form of light. It's meaning like more the comedic side. There's a comedic side to it, too, because I actually had a version of the story happen to me when we lived in Virginia. The guy who lived next door, I don't even remember what it was, but I think it was, he had these little dogs, and I think the dogs would run out in front of the mower when I was mowing the lawn. I was afraid I was going to hit them, run them over, or something like that. And so I went over one day, and I said, we got a leash law here for a reason. Could you just kind of keep your dogs over there? And it was one of those things where it was one little petty thing that led to another until one day, all of a sudden, just like you described, a bunch of his paperish garbage ended up on our lawn. And I started to get upset about it, and then I thought about it for a second. And I looked at the sky, and I looked at the weather report, and I realized the new weather system's going to blow in the opposite direction. I'm just going to leave it there and see if it blows back on his lawn. And you know what? It did.
Oh, my gosh.
I loved it.
Funny. That's so funny.
That's what I mean by a comedic side. When you said that story, I said, oh, my God, that really happened.
Well, and what I'm thinking as I'm talking about this, when I got to the sticky ketchup packets, that's a real story for me. I mean, the anger is not there. Because I like my yard to look clean, so when I go out to get my mail, I pick up trash that's in the street in front of my curb, my neighbor's curb, and across from me, because I look at it when I look out my window. So that matters to me. And the thought that just came to mind, and this is how this kind of stuff works. The thought that came to mind is the silly story that Abraham tells on Esther, where she used to carry a coat hanger. This is back in the day when your car door had a button that you pulled up and down.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And people used to be able to unlock a door.
That's right.
Where they left their keys in the car with a coat hanger.
It was the trick.
And the first time that happened to Esther, it made her feel really good when someone said, do you by chance have a coat hanger? I blocked myself out of my car. And she was able to be very helpful, which is one of the things that makes her very happy. And so then she thought to herself, I'm just going to keep a coat hanger in my car because isn't it nice when I can be helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this went on for so long. At one point, Jerry said to her, look, you just helped 3 people today by having a coat hanger. Do you think you're attracting people who lock themselves out of their car?
Say, what an idea.
You feel so good about being able to help them? And she went, yeah. And he's just said, is it time to leave the coat hanger at home?
That's right, yeah.
And so she did. And that story just came to mind when I was thinking about the ketchup packets.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, I don't mind picking up trash because I love to keep the place beautified. But I do focus on that quite often. Like every day I go out to my mailbox, I look for debris that I can pick up to beautify my neighborhood. Never thought about it before.
Mm-hmm.
I actually focus on looking for debris. And guess what?
You find debris.
I almost always find it.
You do.
It's either on my lawn in front of my curb, or if it's not in front of my curb, it's on my neighbor's curb, and
Sure.
I walk across the street and pick it up.
Yeah, you go look for it, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I can ask myself a question: am I ready to let go of that, or can I keep it? And because it has no negative charge for me, I can do either one.
You can.
And either one is fine.
That's true.
But that's kind of funny. It didn't, because as I was talking about the sticky, I was starting to get an internal sensation. This is actually leading somewhere.
Really?
And I didn't know if it was going to lead to something you were going to say when you talked about your comedic thing. But for me, it led to, I didn't realize how much I had focused on picking up debris in my neighborhood.
Interesting.
So that was like what I'll call a transparent thought. And why I call it a transparent thought is because I think it so often I don't even see it. I don't see that it's right in front of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like when you look out the window of your house and you have a screen. You look straight through the screen, and most of the time you're not paying attention to the screen.
Right, exactly.
You're just looking at what's outside on the other side of the screen. But that's because a screen is meant to be transparent, where you can see through it. And so I call certain beliefs transparent beliefs when you know they're there, because the evidence of law of attraction is bringing unwelcomed things into your life, but you don't know why or how. And you're like, well, it has to be because I'm vibrating something. And if you're vibrating something, it has to be connected to a thought. And if you can't think of anything that it's connected to, I say, then you must have a transparent belief going on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And those are a little trickier, but that's where I use my inner being to help me. It's like, what is it that I'm thinking all the time that I'm not aware of, but it has to be there? What am I thinking? And then I start getting much more mindful of the thoughts that are going through my mind. Because, they're running through our head all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But capturing one and wrangling it and going, hey, I found you. You're there. Just like what I just did with the trash in my yard, sticky ketchup things. And all of a sudden, what came to mind is, wow, every day I go out to get my mail, I am looking for debris or trash to pick up.
So let's take this back to the topic that we talked about yesterday that actually got also introduced on Monday, because that topic was the quantum leap, right? How to take the big steps, the giant steps that Abraham doesn't recommend for beginners, but once you've gotten to the point where you're pretty good at this stuff, well, then it's perhaps time to take a look at quantum leaping. And what you've been describing is one of the processes that you do when you are kind of walking yourself through the steps you have to take in order to take that next quantum leap, depending on whatever it is that you're working on. And we were actually, what got us going on this was a subsection in the book, The Law of Attraction, The Basics of the Teachings of Abraham, called I Want to Take a Quantum Leap. We got halfway through that, and then we got off on doing an entire show about it. Well, we should probably do the other half. What do you think?
All right, well, let's do that.
So the other half is just another question from Jerry, answered by Abraham. Jerry asks, okay, so tell me one more time, how can we fan our desire? How can we make ourselves want more?
And Abraham says, put your thoughts upon what you believe you want, and the law of attraction will draw more information, more data, and more circumstances to your creation. You see, it is a natural process that when you look at what you want and you feel powerful, positive emotion, it's a natural process that when you look at what you want, you will feel powerful, positive emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a matter of holding your thoughts upon what you want. If possible, go to the places where the things that you want are so that you deliberately put yourself in that position of feeling wonderful. And as you are feeling good, all things that by your estimation are good will begin coming into your experience. So wait, let me stop right there and just kind of, because what that means to me when they say put yourself in a place where the things that you want are, already are, I guess that would mean, like if you're wanting a new house, kind of like what you and Louise have been doing, go to model houses and put
Yeah.
yourself walking through them and enjoying them, going on home tours. If you want a new car, go to car lots,
Yeah.
and start looking at things, or go online and look at certain cars, or whatever it is that you might want. Put yourself in the environment where that is, because the environment itself is energetic,
Mm-hmm.
and it will help to fuel or fan the flames of your desire. And the law of attraction will also bring you more thoughts while you're there.
Yeah.
So I think that's what that paragraph is talking about.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically showing us how to whip it up into a frenzy, starting with just focusing on something.
I like that.
That is.
Whip it up into
a frenzy. There we go.
And so then they go on to say, when you focus upon something, the law of attraction will do the fanning. So if it seems that it is requiring a great deal of work for your desires to increase and the positive emotion to be more, it is because you are thinking about what you want and then about its opposite. So you're not really allowing a steady forward motion.
Yeah, very important point from my perspective, because I know I do that. And the interesting part is I often don't recognize the second part of it, that what I'm really doing is focusing on the opposite. That part I often skip over. If I look back on it, yeah, then I have to admit I really was, because I can see particular points in time where I had certain thoughts and like, oh yeah, I guess those really are opposites. But isn't it interesting, in the middle of it, I don't think of it as focusing on opposites.
I think that's normal or typical.
Yeah, I think it is.
But, this is where I'm going to interject my own experience. It's not what Abraham's saying specifically.
Okay.
But my experience is, so when I'm waffling on a subject, I want it, and then without realizing it, I'm focusing on what I don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want it, and then I find myself unconsciously focusing on what I don't want. I think when you go into what you don't want, that does equal a point of resistance.
Yeah.
That's my take on that. Because why else would I be all of a sudden being in doubt, worry, concern for things staying the same?
So what do we do with that? Is it
is
that a recognition point?
You have to become conscious.
Yeah, okay, so it's a recognition point.
Yeah, once you recognize it, then acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can say, and now what do I want to do about it?
Yeah, okay.
Because that's kind of what's happened with me all along this process. When I get to why am I having a hard time focusing on the thing I desire? Then before I know it, something has popped up in a bigger way for me to be able to recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go, oh, okay. Like, the thing that came up for me that, oh, I'm part of a working class family. Nobody in my family's ever broken through the glass ceiling. Everybody works hard and that's what you're supposed to do. Well, that whole set of beliefs was keeping me anchored to not moving forward and having more money.
And so now it becomes a practice of turning that around, basically saying, okay, I'm not going to go on that little storytelling journey anymore. I'm going to replace it with a new story.
Well, and if just telling a new story doesn't seem to be potent enough, then that tells me you have some belief that you got to go after and shoot.
Before you're going to be able to get any traction.
Or in yesterday's word, you got to blow it up.
You got to blow it up, yes. Kaboom!
Yeah, and that's what I did, because I've had so many people just say, well, just don't do it anymore. Like, you know the folly in that thought.
Yeah, right.
And I'll think to myself, well, I do know consciously, logically, mentally, intelligently, I do know the folly in thinking this thought. And yet, it feels so real, I can't just let it go. And when I'm at the point it feels so real, I just can't let it go, I know there's something there that I need to keep searching for so I can blow it up. And like in the case that I'm talking about now, I'm part of a working class family, never gotten behind it. And nobody in my family has gotten outside of being a working class family. And you got to work hard to make money. It can't come easy. That's when I like stumbled upon, my friend asked me a question and I burst into tears and the subject in my mind, it's like my memory just boom went there of me discouraging my father from making a lot of money. And then realizing, how can I go and do the thing that I discouraged him from?
Yeah, that was a big one.
And my friend Rhonda, bless her heart, she said, well, that's silly. And I said, I do. But it felt so real, I couldn't let go of it.
Mm.
It's like the guilt was so strong. Like, how can I go and do something that I was discouraging my father from doing? That makes me such a hypocrite. That goes against my sense of virtue, my sense of integrity, because I believe in walking my talk. And so I had to look at this from a completely different angle. And I had to kind of go more generic and go, you know what? If my father were still here today on this planet, he would not say to me, Wendy, I don't want you to have success in life, because if I didn't have success, you can't have it. He would never say that to me.
No.
That was just stuff.
Stuff. I like
so
that.
I had to start.
I like that. Stuff. It's just stuff. And it's just sort of a generic, nice, easy noun that applies to all of the junk that we want to get rid of. It's stuff.
Well, and I mean, who knows how young I was when I started feeling this way and started feeling comfortable in my middle-class America, living paycheck to paycheck, always being in debt. Who knows when that started for me. But it's like I was taking a look at it in this moment and went, that doesn't serve me. Holding on to that doesn't serve me. But it felt so real, Walt.
Mm.
It didn't let go easily.
Yeah.
Until I allowed myself to think some new thoughts that kind of trumped the old ones.
Mm-hmm. Makes a difference.
And one of the big things was my father's now transitioned.
Mm-hmm.
And my belief is that all beings on the other side live in a space of pure positive energy.
Yep.
They're not into revenge.
Nope.
They're not into guilt. And so I just pictured my father, and I kind of connected with him. I did. I connected with him on the other side and just kind of asked the question. I was off the conversation with Rhonda. It was just me. And I just said, Dad, can you forgive me? Which was really me asking, can I forgive myself? Can you forgive me for discouraging you? And he's like, pfft. And that's the kind of response he would have. It's just, kind of like, don't even ask. That's a stupid question. And I'd say, so if I really go out and make a whole lot of money, it's not going to upset your apple cart that because you didn't. And this is what I literally heard in my mind's ear. Now, whether he said it or I got it from my inner being or I made it up, doesn't matter, because it encouraged me. And what I heard was, I'd be so proud of you if you went and lived the life that you were born to live and you followed your dreams.
Well, that's nice.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Just go for it. And I was like, okay. And that's when that real belief broke apart.
Nice.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I can go do what it is that I want to do. And I know I have your support. And I know I'm not hurting you or anybody else in the process when I go and live a fantastically successful life. And I just had that, because he was a drummer. I kind of heard that ba-dum-bump drum roll. Yep, you got it.
Mm-hmm.
He used to do that at the dinner table all the time when you'd say something he really liked. Yep, ba-dum-bump, boom.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so at that point, that belief had broken apart. I blew it up. I blew up the old belief. And the new belief was, go out there and live your life. If you want success, go after it. It's there for you to take. It's there.
You know what's funny,
now,
though? I mean, you described that as blowing it up. But honestly, you know what it sounded like to me? It sounded like it disintegrated.
Same thing.
Like it just kind of went pile of dust on the ground.
I mean, energy never can be destroyed, but it can be transmuted or changed.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, when I call it blowing it up, and that was just something I said yesterday, it's not like my normal wording. Actually, I normally say I've transmuted it, but I don't want to say that because people go, what the heck are you talking about? If I blow it up or change it or turn it into dust, it doesn't really matter. The point is it's changed.
True.
And that old belief in the way it was holding on to me has shifted.
Mm-hmm.
It no longer is like, shackling me and like got me by the throat.
Right. Which is the most important thing, to get rid of that.
Yeah, it's like it's gone. And so I don't feel just neutral. See, if I only shattered the old belief, I'd probably be at a space of neutral. That's been my experience. And I don't like neutral. I mean, some places neutral is good, but in this case, I wanted to shatter the old belief and get a brand new belief that is shiny and feels good, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay.
And knowing that I can go forth and conquer, oh, that's a good one for me. And I know I keep changing the words, but it's kind of like new words just keep coming to me every time I go to articulate it.
Well, it's fun, yeah.
Which also adds to the new beliefs, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I don't even know where we started off on that one, but you know me, I can run a tangent quite nicely.
Well, there's also a nice little parallel coming up because the next section of the book perfectly parallels your Project X and even your Project B, too. It's real short. It's called Aren't the Grander Things Hard to Manifest or Harder to Manifest? Jerry asks, then what would you say is the reason why almost everyone feels that they can create or manifest little things, but they feel like they can't create the larger things?
And Abraham says it's because they are not understanding the law, and they are hinging what can be upon what has been. Then in italics, when you understand the laws, then you understand that it is not more difficult to create a castle than it is a button. They are equal. It is not more difficult to create $10 million than $100,000. It's the same application of the same law to two different intentions.
Which is at the exact root of what you went after when you started to do Project B. You wanted to really go for the gusto. Not be held back by the gusto's too big.
Oh, exactly. Now, but on Project X, which is about money, I was going for the gusto.
Yeah.
I'm going for the castle because if I can have a button or a castle, I prefer a castle.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And yet these other things were showing up that, you know what, even if I wanted a button, I wouldn't have been able to produce the button because I still had so much resistance.
Isn't that annoying?
But I'll tell you, I mean, from my perspective, I've had it in my understanding for a long time from Abraham. I've heard them talk about the button versus the castle many times.
Right.
And when I think about that, there had been, and I think this is pretty past tense, there had been such a sense of, huh? How is it possible?
Mm-hmm.
Because I would think of the specifics of what it takes to create either. And then, Walt, there was even a point that I'm like, I wouldn't even know how to create a button.
Yeah, sure.
I go to the store and buy buttons, but
That's
how do you create a button? You need a manufacturing plant and you need plastic. Oh my God, I could take myself down so many roads. But I understand what they're saying. I mean, and they said 10 million versus 100,000. They could have said 10 million versus $100 or $10.
Oh yeah, it would have been just as real.
It's just as real because if you're in the place right now where $100 would make or break your life, then this statement that it's nothing different to create 10 million versus 100,000 is kind of like, oh yeah, those numbers mean nothing to me. They're so far beyond where I am.
Exactly. Yeah.
But for some people coming to the point where they could say, creating an income flow that covers my bills would be such a grand, fabulous thing to receive from the universe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I know plenty of people whose income is smaller than their expenses. I have certainly been one of those people for many years.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, figuring out how that was going to happen seemed impossible.
It does.
Because, what I think the typical thought process is, and I'm just dissecting this one as we're speaking, is, well, if I make, I'm going to use round numbers. If I make $50,000 a year, but my expenses are $60,000 a year, I'm going to have to find a job where I can make a part-time job where I can make $10,000 a year just to break even.
Right.
But the first place most people go is, I have to find another job.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know somebody who said, or I need to take in a roommate. I don't really want to. I love living alone, but I'm going to have to take in a roommate to generate income. And if I don't do that, I'm going to have to get another job. And I don't know how I'm going to do that because the job I have now is already kicking my butt energetically.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wiped out at the end of my 40 weeks or my 40-hour shift.
Put another way, whenever we're trying to resolve this issue, the last thing we have in mind is using the law of attraction and creating it out of thin air and saying, you know what, I'm going to attract not just the 10,000, but even a lot more than that. Because it's so much easier to think in terms of, well, here's what I can practically do with just taking physical steps and taking actions. Because actions I know I can count on. I can't count on that other stuff. That's the feeling that I have. So I'm going to focus on only the thing that I can count on. And boy, this is going to be hard. Oh, God.
Well, and like the person, there's a real person I'm thinking of whose situation is where the income is not big enough to meet the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And that this person had a lump sum of cash given to her by a source. And little by little, she'd been taking part of that, what she had now put in her savings. And that's how she'd been living for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And now it all ran out.
Right.
And now it's like, oops, now what?
Yeah.
And I remember saying a couple of years ago, when these circumstances happened, just because the only two options you can think of is either I have to get a part-time job or I need to take on a roommate, neither one of which were appealing to her. I said, there could be a third, fourth, fifth, or sixth option that because you only are allowing yourself to consider the two, you cut yourself off from the other options that law of attraction can actually deliver to you.
Exactly. That's it. That's what we do.
And in her case, what if a part-time job is exactly what would work for her, but because right now her thought of a part-time job is, I'm already tired from the one job I do have. I work such weird hours. I have no idea how I could find a job that would fit in with my current work hours. And then, a whole list of things that say that's not going to work. Well, if she lets go of that idea that has to be the only way, and I don't like it, and she go, you know what, I'm just open to any and all possibilities that the law of attraction can bring to me that would allow my life to continue in, as it is, in a way of ease, she could all of a sudden get something where, and I think something's opening up to her right now, where there's something where she can do for like 4 hours a week, and that 4 hours a week is going to pay her because that employer is going to pay her much more than what she could have even expected. It's more than what she even gets in her current job. And it's something that she could work into her schedule with ease.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not even something that she thought was possible because she was so stuck on, well, if I need more money, it can only come one of two ways.
Isn't it interesting how we very easily fall into, I'm only limited down to these two options. We have the ability to dream. We have the ability to expand the possibilities. We have the ability to kind of reach out further than what we've got right now. We have the ability to do that, but our first inclination is to pull it all down, to pull it all within. And in doing so, we cut ourselves off from the one thing that is the most powerful, our dreaming.
And I guess I would also say just letting go and allowing the universe to provide the way.
Mm.
Letting go is not giving up.
Good point.
Letting go and surrendering to the magnificent power of the universe, that's I call wisdom. Because the universe and your inner being and or God and or source energy, any of these things that you refer to as a higher power have a very different vantage point than we do. They see things not just 360, they see things from a spherical perspective, up, down, inside out, backwards, up, in the future, in the past, in the present. They see things from a space of all knowledge. And so they see things that we do not. And because we have a very societally oriented mind, the typical thing is when you need more money, the typical answer is you need a job that makes more money or you need another job. People think most of the time in terms of if you need more money, you have to work for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Sometimes you don't.
No, you don't. Louise and I are finding that firsthand.
And my friend Rhonda is one of the authors in the book, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to give away her chapter, but her chapter is one of the most magnificent examples of how the universe provided something for her monetarily that she did one time, and she didn't even know what it was about and didn't even know she would even get paid for it, and yet it's sending her money on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
It's free money.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
And so there are so many things that are available to us, but if we limit our thinking, we literally limit the universe and the universe's ability to provide things to us that are off our list.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we go, it's either got to be A or B, because all I can think of is it's either I got to do A or B, and you know what? I don't like either one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, if you have only A or B, you limit what's possible.
Right.
And second, if you get to the point, well, now I'm desperate and I better just pick one, A or B, I promise whichever one you pick, it will not go well.
No.
Because you made a decision, but you did it from a place of either desperation or anger or frustration. You didn't make the decision from a place of lightness and ease and flow and intuitive guidance,
Mm-hmm.
where you get this gut feel to just talk to somebody, hey, I could really use a roommate. And they say, I know somebody. And the truth is they're hardly ever even home, but they need a place to put their stuff, but they travel most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, that's like, woohoo, perfect roommate.
Yeah, right.
For somebody who doesn't really want a roommate, but yet they get the income from it.
Exactly.
Okay, that'll work.
Yep. It's an amazing thing. I mean, Louise and I are experiencing it now. Now, most of what, well, I shouldn't say that. Part of what we've been experiencing, this is through her business, is a huge transition from last year, where last year she was working her head off. I wasn't quite doing that because I was just trying to make some changes so that she wouldn't keep working her head off. And we kind of set the goal that this year we were going to do a much smaller amount of work, and we were going to dish off work to other people. And that was a little bit of a hard transition to make mentally, but we did make it. And guess what's happening this year? We're dishing off work to people who are working underneath us. I mean, we're really not doing all that much compared to last year. And we haven't even, it's a huge transition. And yet I'm realizing even now, we've got a whole lot more transition to go, because we're going to get to the point where we're just dishing it all off and just kind of keeping an eye on it from afar. And wow, what a great place that's going to be.
So when you say dishing it off, you're talking about you're delegating work that in the past, Louise and or you had to physically do yourself.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that's leverage.
It is. It's fabulous. It's a great place to be.
And not that we have time to go into this example, but I will just say this, that Abraham has talked about using the universe as your personal leverage, as your personal manager. Because, and sometimes I forget that, but when I remember it, it works so beautifully for me, because I'm like, okay, universal manager, you see things in a way that I can't. And so here's what I need done. That's on your to-do list. And I'll do these things because these are easy.
Or fun. Actually, that's our rule.
Abraham taught Esther how to do that. So maybe we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, let's do it tomorrow. That sounds good. And we hope that you all will join us as well tomorrow here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye now.